down that camera and strap in. It's time for another episode of TOGCHAT Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news and tips, along with your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus visionary, Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, welcome to episode number 216 of TOGCHAT Live. This episode of TOGCHAT, I am proud to say, is sponsored by my friends at Spiffy Gear. Spiffy Gear brings us the Light Blaster, the Specular Lights, and the new KYU6 bicolor and RGB flexible LED light wraps. I'll tell you a little bit more about those when we get into the show. Be sure to check out the show notes. I have a 15% discount code for you below. Already, I'm seeing people here checking in from all over the world. So please, folks, if you haven't done so already, be sure to check in, let me know you're here and where you are in the world. I've got some of my mentor group here tonight. John is here from Harrisburg, Eric from San Antonio, Lynn is here from New York, and I saw Nick's here from down in Maryland, and we've got Ken in the UK and Matthew also in the UK. Let's see, who else we got here? We got Gigi in the UK, David from San Diego. I've got FN89 in Ottawa, Canada, Tina in Washington State, Anthony also from my mentor group down in North Carolina, Luis in Portugal. Thank you all. It is always so cool to see so many people from so many different countries tuning in to chat about their love of photography. And of course, in this crazy time, I hope that you're all healthy, staying safe, and of course, practicing your social distancing and wearing those masks. And as always, I've got a serious favor to ask of you. That thumbs up that's down there, please give it a click. I'm going to work really hard to help you with your photography in the next 60 minutes, and it would help more people find my channel and TOGCHAT if you could do me a solid and hit that thumbs up. And while you're looking down there, feel free to hit that share button. Let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Okay? So, Twitter, of course, Facebook, they're the fastest way for you to go ahead and get the word out. So how can I help you with your photography tonight? That's why we're here, right? Start posting your questions. I will do my best to answer them all in the next 60 minutes. And please remember, this is a gear-free zone. We're going to talk about the hows and the whys behind creating great images and marketing yourself as a photographer. That might include gear if it's a question about how to do something, but I'm not going to tell you what your next camera buy should be. Now, folks, I know it's fun to chat, but I'm also going to ask you to save the chat for the questions so that you don't miss anything important and so that I don't miss any questions amongst all the chat noise. Remember, we're here to learn. So this week, I want to switch things up a little bit and tackle our topic of the week before we look at the photo news from the past week. So tonight, I have an interesting and kind of a tough topic to discuss with you. Behavior. Specifically, what kinds of behavior and habits are consistent among the best photographers in the world. You know, ironically, in the past week, I've had 3 conversations with photographers who were frustrated and struggling to improve their work. Now, these are people who are very serious about improving their photography, and even though they were looking to me for insight, they had already convinced themselves that they needed to spend more time and money to take yet another class or classes or a workshop. And as I talked to them and I dug deeper into their situations, all 3 of them admitted to me that they had watched loads of videos, taken classes, and honestly felt like they had so much information stuffed into their brains that when they picked up their camera, they felt overwhelmed because they just couldn't remember everything that they've learned. And that is learned by someone telling them in a book or a video or a class, but not learned by doing. In other words, real experience. So these conversations, for me, they highlighted some bad habits that I'm finding are extremely common in our industry. Now, to list a few of the bad habits, of course, it begins with the basic stuff, right? Not reading the camera manuals and, as a result, not understanding your gear. Not taking time to learn the foundational things like exposure controls and depth of field and the inverse square law, and that list goes on. But there's a very bad habit that is becoming very commonplace today. It is too much learning without enough experiencing. And I promise you, this is real science at play here, folks. This is not Joe's opinion. There is sincere logic to the age-old adage that too much knowledge is never a bad thing. Unfortunately, that is old logic that doesn't account for the technology-driven world that we live in today. And modern science has proven this over and over again. You see, too much knowledge is actually bad for your memory. And that is exactly the problem that these photographers are describing to me. So imagine, if you will, a stack of paper on a desk. That stack of paper represents all of the information that is stored in your brain. Each piece of paper has one bit of knowledge on it. Now, while you still only have a few pieces of paper when you're beginning, you can easily remember where in the stack is the knowledge bit that you are looking for at any given time. But the bigger the stack gets, the harder it is to remember where the different bits of knowledge are. And since you don't remember every piece of paper in the stack, or excuse me, since you don't review every piece of paper in the stack routinely, you also forget where that knowledge bit is in the stack. You see, the more knowledge that you add to your brain without experiencing that knowledge, you actually suppress much of the memory that is already there, which just serves to make it harder to access those memories. You see, as adults, again, more science. You can Google this stuff, gang. We are experiential learners. By experiencing something, you involve more of your senses. Smell, touch, taste, all of those things. And each of those different senses creates memories that are integrated. The net result, it makes them more powerful memories, and it makes those memories easier to access in the future. So the moral here is that you won't find success without doing. Thinking about it, dreaming about it, learning about it. Without doing it, it doesn't count. And it won't make you better. Successful people, they get the job done. So the 9 behaviors that all great photographers embrace. Number 1, regardless of their age and regardless of their level of experience, they are always excited to learn. But learning to them is not just listening or reading or watching. For great photographers, learning almost always involves new experiences. Number 2, they have the belief that whatever they see or imagine, they are able to make a photograph of it. This confidence comes from having a familiarity with their gear, the kind of familiarity that comes from making smart and informed gear purchases and reading instruction manuals and actually practicing. This confidence comes from not being hung up on technique. And in addition to being familiar with their gear, they clearly understand the limits of their gear and their own skill sets. And believe me, being honest with yourself about what you know and what you don't know will save you from making some huge mistakes. Number 3, they understand the difference between seeing something and looking at something. Research by cognitive psychologists has proven that 75% of all sighted people are blind. In other words, we look at things, but we don't really see things. Challenge is, success as a photographer requires developing an acute eye for details. Great photographers also have developed an ability to perceive or imagine the outcome of a photo and what it will require to make that happen before they pick up the camera. Number 4, in addition to seeing details, they have developed the ability to see and understand the intricacies of light. Look, being great at lighting does, of course, require, understanding exposure and the inverse square law. But more importantly, it also requires developing the ability to see the nuances. I would argue that great lighting comes from that ability to master the nuances, the subtleties of light. Now, in order to master this skill, you need to learn about the emotion in lighting and how lighting impacts mood and perception. Number 5, they compose an image by instinct and not by rules. Logical rules apply. None of those art world rules like a rule of thirds or spirals. I'm talking about a very simple concept of include everything that needs to be there and exclude everything that you don't want to be there or that doesn't need to be there. This is the power of selectivity, but it requires paying attention to the details in real time. Also important to their approach to composition is the idea of composing in camera, not doing it later in Photoshop, and not shooting wide and cropping after the fact. Henri Cartier-Bresson was quoted as explaining, I quote, "It is seldom indeed that a composition which was poor when the picture was taken can be improved by reshaping it in the darkroom," unquote. Truer words have never been spoken. Number 6, they are flexible in their approach to their subject. Every photographer develops a style, but great photographers are not lazy. They embrace change and seek uniqueness. They are able and willing to improvise. They understand that all great photography is the result of excellent problem-solving skills. Number 7, they understand and embrace the value of preparation for a shoot. Hopefully you attended my online presentation about shoot prep. If not, there's one coming up in the fall. But great photography is not about taking pictures. Great photographers make pictures. Number 8, they are their own toughest critic. Their goal is to produce work of the highest quality possible. They are self-aware and they avoid repeating themselves or copying others, and they are ruthless in their visual editing, always striving for an end result that is strong. Now, just to be clear about the phrase visual editing, I am not referring to Photoshop. I mean visual editing in the sense of include everything that needs to be there and exclude everything that you don't want to be there. Number 9, they are free from the dogma of rules and the expectations of others in their field. They answer only to themselves and their subjects and their clients. Think about that one, because that one is honestly potentially the most important of the 9. Shoot for you. Hold yourself to these high standards. Don't rely on the internet or some Facebook group or a client or a subject to hold you to those standards. You hold yourself to those standards. And let me give you one bonus trait. Number 10. Great photographers aren't afraid of failure. In fact, they chase perfection, but they actually don't want to achieve it. Think about it. If you ever achieved perfection, what would you do for an encore? They chase perfection as a way of setting standards for themselves to always improve and to always impress with their work. So there you have it. 10, not 9, excellent traits that you should embrace and adopt if you are serious about improving your skills as a photographer. And believe me, we could probably write a list of adjectives of qualities that photographers possess that would be longer than my arm. But these in particular, I think, and the reason why I selected them, they are 10 traits which are often unique to the greatest photographers. We do not find those traits in every photographer. We simply don't. And I believe that's unfortunate, and I believe it's also very telling. So I would call these traits maybe the kind of not so obvious traits, in the sense that with everything that's on the internet, with everything that we are bombarded with information-wise in our industry, it's easy to think a little bit differently and think that you should be worrying about some of the things that I'm saying, hey, don't worry about those. But I assure you, if you want to challenge what I've told you, do a little bit of research, and you will find that the advice I've just given you, it's grounded in 2 solid foundational areas. 1, science. Can't argue with the science. 2, look through the careers of some of the greatest photographers in history and currently. And I've had the good fortune, which you folks know recently, to interview several incredible photographers. And these traits that I'm talking about are traits that they talked about in their interviews and traits that apply to their work in the beginning of their career and now towards the end of their careers. So it's good advice. And now for the important and interesting photo news of the week. There is none. Seriously. Think about the 9 traits that I just shared with you. They don't include spending time on the photography blogs, watching videos of 2 photographers using a toy camera to take pictures. Come on, really? What did we learn there? Nothing. 11 minutes. Or reading about the fact that Sony is about to announce a new camera. Like, that's a shock, right? Come on. I promise you, there was nothing published on the 4 major photo blogs in the last week that will help you to improve your photography. If there was, you have my word. I would share it with you. So, use the extra time that I am giving you by not having to go out and check these articles or these videos on the blogs. Use that time this week to actually take some photos and improve your photography in the best way possible by doing it, not by reading what somebody else says you should do. All right, gang. Let's get into tonight's questions. How can I help you with your photography? So I do have a few questions that came in from my Facebook groups, which, by the way, if you are not a member of my Facebook groups, what the heck, right? Come on, join. If you're a people shooter, you should join my I Shoot People photography group on Facebook. And if you are more of a generalist, you should join the Tog Knowledge group. I'm going to go ahead and share the links to both of those groups in the chat window here so that you can go ahead and join the groups, okay? So, and they're also in the show notes below the video. So the few questions that came in early, and we've got some good questions lining up here, gang, but there's room for more. So dig in. You know that I have a bad habit of not finishing on time. I will try to get to every single question. You have my word, all right? So the first one here comes from James, and he says that he is just starting out doing model photography after years of non-people stuff. I love that categorizing there. Any tips to get comfortable doing it and connecting with your models? So James, the first part, any tips to get comfortable doing it? It's, you know, my theme is always the same. You got to dive in and do it, and you have to do it and do it and do it. It's practice. It's building habits. It's actually, James, all of the things that I just talked about in the 10 traits. So dive in. In terms of learning things about it, yeah, you'll find some resources online, but I am going to stick with what I've told you and what I generally recommend to people. Since you're just starting that, don't go looking for all kinds of YouTube videos about how to photograph models. Don't go looking for all kinds of blog articles or even buy a book. Don't do that. Dive in and create some experiences for yourself. And in the course of doing those experiences, understand that any great photograph is the result of problem solving. So your challenge is to evaluate your work and your experiences that you're having and then solve the problems in terms of how to make them better. Because no one else, James, gets to determine for you what is better. That's up to you, right? As far as, oh, and by the way, then, once you get into that process, if there are certain problems that you're just really kind of beating your head against the wall and you're not able to solve, that's when you go to YouTube or you go to a blog or a book and you seek advice. And that advice really is ideas, learning about how somebody else solves that problem so that you can go and try that and decide for yourself if that methodology works best for you. Okay? The second piece of that, connecting with your models. Well, first of all, stop thinking of them as models. They're people. In life, in relationships, in work, in social situations, we learn, some of us awkwardly, but nonetheless we learn how to connect with people. I promise you, if you think of your models as people who have thoughts and emotions and fears and anxieties, all of the same kinds of things that you have, it is going to be much easier to connect with them. So when you're trying to give direction, when you are asking a model to do something, some type of pose, whatever, put yourself in his or her shoes and imagine having to do that. And then communicate accordingly. And you're going to find it will go much smoother. Matthew Freer just mentioned here the idea of getting it here. Let me, whoops, I'm clicking on the wrong thing. There it is. Let me put that up there. He mentioned the idea of using a mannequin. The best thing I got to help practicing for setting up shots in the studio was a mannequin. Then when I shot people, I knew the technical and only had to worry about communicating. And Matthew, you know that I completely agree with this. James, I will tell you that if you're going to photograph models or people, portraits, anything in that realm, understand that 80% of the work that you are about to do is actually psychology. It is that connecting, that motivating, the energizing, the getting what you want out of your subject. 20% of it is the photography. And because that's such a small portion of it, it's incredibly important that you have that nailed down and figured out in advance. One of the great things, as Maddie mentions about working with a mannequin, is that you can set up your shots in advance of a shoot in terms of how you want to light them, how you want to set them up, and know exactly everything you need to do, solve all the problems, so that when it's time to do the actual shoot and you have that model with you, you already have a plan for how you're going to set your lights. You know exactly how to get the lighting to do what you want it to do. And you're not going to be there fumbling and bumbling and trying to figure it out, which only causes stress for you. And of course, for your subject, leaves them worrying like, yeah, does this guy really know what he's doing or not, right? Because we don't want that to happen either. So, Matthew, thanks for adding that, okay? Question here from Jim Moffitt. Motivation during COVID. Yeah, I mean, this is a challenge for all of us, let's face it. He had to cancel multiple senior and family portraits. He closed his studio. Full disclosure, I know Jim personally. Jim had a studio in the same building, the Cigar Factory Artist Lofts in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where I had my studio for a year, okay? Like me, he says he could not justify the expense for a space that he was not using. He's been doing some still life and landscapes. They're not really his thing. He needs to be able to make a connection with the subject, and cows and flowers, of course, don't cut it. Yeah, Jim, I mean, it is hard. Myself, there are probably, and Jim, I know you're aware of this, being in Allentown as well, there are tons of photographers in the area that are kind of, shall we say, back to business as normal. I don't particularly agree with that in general, regardless of my own situation. I think that's a bad plan. However, it's not up for me to decide, you know, the choices that these other people are going to make. And the law permits them to do it. So I want to be clear. These people are following guidelines. They're wearing masks. They're doing the things that are required of them to do. So please, I don't want anyone to think that, you know, they're doing things that are legally inappropriate by any means. My own personal situation, Jim, you know, I'm pretty healthy. I'm not super worried about myself, and I'm not convinced that I actually didn't have it in February, and I haven't been tested for antibodies. But more importantly, my wife is high risk. So, you know, we have been extremely diligent through all of this and being very careful and continue to be. So I'm not really in a position where I can walk into a studio space, you know, a smaller confined space, masks or no masks, and invite people in and, you know, have a makeup artist and or a hairstylist and a model. So I'm with you. So I think, Jim, that, you know, the challenge and kind of what I've done is I started out, as you all know, doing the Stuck at Home challenge. Like literally from the day that I was stuck at home and knew that we were going into lockdown, I started doing this challenge. And it was actually a ton of fun. All of the images that I created doing the Stuck at Home challenge were not the kinds of images that I would normally take. And for the sake of the 2 weeks that I was posting those videos every single day, it was a lot of fun that they were not the kinds of things that I would normally do. Indeed, over time, I'm not going to lie, I got tired of shooting the abstracts because it was kind of becoming a job at that point. It's like turning out a video a day. So I slowed down on that, and I knew that, you know, I would keep up with my photography mindset by the occasional iPhone picture, which we all do, but also by using my little Olympus Tough TG6, sticking it in my pocket, carrying it with me, and I've been taking tons of pictures on dog walks and things like that with that camera, literally just for fun. Nothing that I'm probably ever going to share, nothing that is ever going to go on my portfolio or on my website, but just things to challenge myself and learn a little bit about that camera, learn a little bit about myself. But in my case, Jim, and everybody's going to find their own variation of this, what I also did was basically decide, you know what, and from very early on, I listened to the medical people. I don't want to make this political, folks. It's not political. But I listened to the medical people, and it was very obvious all the way back in March that the year 2020 was a wash. It was done. Sure, I held out hope maybe for the end of the year, maybe like Photo Plus would happen in person, etc. But that became really evident really quickly. Ain't happening. Done. So my mindset changed from the idea of, well, oh God, this sucks, this is miserable, to, okay, this is my situation. How do I progress? So part of that was, you know, I lost every speaking engagement that I had booked for the year. So it's like, how am I going to make money? So I took my education online. I had some very, very specific things about teaching online that I thought sucked, from webinars and things like that I've attended. So it was really, really important to me to be able to find ways to make my online presentations as much like hearing me speak in person as possible. And so as it is now, I've created 14 different online presentations, which after COVID, I'll be able to continue to do online and They're all also designed that I can do them in person for camera clubs, trade shows, events, all that kind of stuff. So I've been, all in on photography, probably working more hours now than I have in about the last 4 years, literally. But it's not every minute with the camera. But it's writing about the camera, it's talking about the camera, it's teaching about the camera, that kind of thing. What I would suggest, Jim, since obviously I know you're not doing the teaching stuff, I would suggest still shooting the cows, still shooting the flowers, maybe shooting abstracts around the house. But here's what you have to do. You kind of have to change your thought process a little bit. They're still not going to become your thing, and that's okay. But every time you see an opportunity to take a picture of something, don't approach it in the idea of like, oh, it's another freaking flower. No. Approach it from the idea of, what can I learn from this flower? And I don't even mean about photographing flowers. I mean, maybe you get your strobes out, Jim, and you work on lighting. Maybe you really want to fine-tune your depth of field knowledge. Maybe you want to work on the inverse square law with lighting and flower. So you basically take pieces of photography that you want to improve with and know you can improve with, and you're just basically substituting these subjects with, a human, or for a human. To me, that still ticks off the checkbox based on my 10 traits tonight of, being able to push yourself and learn and experience. And I promise you, it is going to be much more valuable than watching YouTube videos or, reading blogs or books or any of that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of how you look at it, and you actually make it productive. Certainly, it's not going to be as satisfying if you're photographing as if you were photographing people. I completely understand that. But look at it from the standpoint that it can actually be more productive. Because while you're photographing people right now, you're at a point and a skill level where you kind of know what you're doing. So if you're being honest with yourself, and this applies to everyone, when you're doing those little jobs, you're not really learning much because you're doing what you know. Plus, it's work. So there's only so much experimenting you can do on a gig. So really what COVID is giving us, if we remain upbeat and productive and we choose to continue to push ourselves, folks, this is for all of you, it's really giving us a great opportunity to reset on the learning. I mean, that's why you're hearing me talk about so much, last week about understanding the value of why, this week about the traits that successful photographers embrace. When we come out of COVID, the world will be a little bit different. When we come out of COVID, the photography industry will be a little bit different. I refuse to say it will be worse. I do believe it will be better because we have an opportunity to learn so much. And again, I'm leaving all politics out of this, right? Just in terms of photography. We've been given an opportunity. Life has slowed down a little bit. Yes, we don't have the things that we love and that we're passionate about, but that means we have time and we have ability that if we are truly passionate about our photography, we can put it to good use. So I would encourage all of you to do that. Robert Varner here added that 2021 may also be a washout. Whoops, let me get rid of the one comment there. Sorry, guys. Indeed, Robert, 2021 would very, potentially be a washout. Certainly, I'm not a psychic, but if we listen closely to everything that the medical people are doing and saying, yeah, there's a very good potential that, especially for people that are compromised, especially for the idea of mass gatherings, it could easily be into the middle or third quarter of 2021 before that is universally considered to be a safe or smart thing to do. It sucks, right? Of course it sucks. But, I think, honestly, the smart move is to kind of accept that fact and understand it. That could be what it is, and we make the best of it in the meantime. Eric, thank you so much for the super chat. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, thank you. Let's see here from Dehan. What is the current status of copyright and Instagram? Hot topic. And the short answer, screwed up. Okay. I recently had a brand reshare an image of mine, and I want to pursue compensation, but I'm afraid that since I posted on Instagram, I gave away my rights. Has there been a further ruling since the one that said it becomes public domain once posted? Or even with that ruling, is there a way to let them know that they are in the wrong and should support small businesses by paying for marketing materials? Okay. So, first of all, this is an excellent question. The challenge is here that, number one, let me throw in the usual YouTube disclaimer here. Oh, in fact, excuse me one second. There we go. The usual YouTube disclaimer is, I am not a lawyer. I do not act like a lawyer on television. I do not pretend to be a lawyer on YouTube. And you should not take your legal advice from some guy on YouTube. Now, that being said, I will tell you that I have only casually followed this story. But let me explain why. So for those of you that aren't up to speed on it and may not feel that you need to be up to speed on it, there is a lawsuit that's bouncing around right now between a photographer and a model and Volvo, the car company, right? This photographer had worked with a model for the purpose of doing some shots for their portfolio and to help promote her for modeling work, posted them on Instagram, and I believe tagged Volvo in the course of doing it. Volvo had reached out and asked if they could share the images and use the images. The photographer, of course, realized, hey, that means there's value to those images, and wrote them back several times, if I'm not mistaken, to begin a discussion about compensation. The photographer had also posted a few images, not on Instagram, but on Behance, the Adobe platform, which were higher res images. So then these images show up on the Volvo Instagram feed. And I don't even remember, so I'm not going to pretend to. I don't recall if there was credit or not credit. But anyway, so there's a lawsuit going back and forth. Volvo is proclaiming that they have broken no laws and they owe this photographer and this model nothing because the images were provided to them through the embed feature provided by Instagram. And then, of course, we all know that between Facebook and Instagram over the years, there's been lots of debate and stress and arguments and everything else about the language that they use in their terms of service. So it's all kind of up in the air. So the bottom line is this: regardless of how that lawsuit comes out, just understand that if you drive a Volvo or go to buy a Volvo, excuse my French, but what they have done with this photographer and this model, and especially the fact that they're pushing back so hard in court, that's a dick move. Again, excuse my French, but it just simply is. Okay? Now, to Dahan's situation, this was posted in my Facebook group, so I asked him for a little bit of follow-up. He photographs motocross, motorcycle riders, and that racing and things like that, and also like kids doing it. And so he has a really, really cool shot of this kid, going over like a jump. And the company that makes this kid's vest, apparently he had provided the image to the kid or the rider. They posted it on their Instagram, the company, and tagged the company. The company then took it from his Instagram and reposted it, but cropped the image down a little bit so you don't see the repost notice. You just see like the bottom of the repost notice. Didn't tag the driver or the photographer, nothing. Okay? So here's my take. Now, I know we have at least one attorney in the audience right now, live. So he may weigh in because he does. He's part of my mentoring group, and he knows I'm not a fan of attorneys. I'm basically not a fan of litigious people. But here's the situation, and this is what I would recommend you do. So this is not legal advice, Dahan, because I'm actually going to recommend you not to waste your money suing them, because I really don't think it's going to be worth it. In terms of do you own the images, you still own the images. Don't worry. And Instagram is not saying that you don't own the images. You still own the copyright to the images, and Instagram is not saying otherwise there. This whole situation is a threat to that ownership and to those copyrights, and it's a bigger issue that is actually being championed by PPA. You guys have heard me talking about PPA for the last couple of weeks. PPA is battling to have changes made to the copyright laws, because here's the real problem behind this. So I'm up at 50,000 feet right now. The copyright laws in the United States are antiquated. They are very simple laws, which is actually a good thing. As far as I'm concerned, anytime a law is simple and easy to understand, that's good, right? That just makes it easy because then we don't necessarily need an attorney. And that's actually how the copyright laws are structured. But here's the problem. Those copyright laws were written decades before the concept of the internet existed, and even more decades before the concept of social media was ever conceived of. So they have no thought involved in terms of how do those laws apply when we get to these tools that we have for social media. So, and let's face it, guys, we can't have it both ways entirely. We have to find the dividing lines. And so the answer here is we have to change the laws, because we all like the fact that we can share things on social media and we can tag and we can get that instant recognition. We all love that. And that's good. We don't want to see that go away. But at the same time, if someone is going to profit off of your images, then at a minimum, they certainly should be, asking permission or tagging, et cetera. So again, the real issue is at 50,000 feet, the laws need to be changed. But where we're at right now, Dahan, I went and I Googled that particular company. And from everything that I could see, even though they don't give a lot of personal information on their website, it really appears that it's essentially kind of a mom and pop shop operation. In other words, a really small company. This is certainly not a huge national brand that's bringing in millions of dollars a year. I don't doubt that there may be more of one of the well-known brand names in that space, but it's not a big company. So the way that I approach stuff like this, let's get to the part where maybe this can help you. I am not one that immediately sees dollar signs when things like that happen. I'm not. For me, my outlook is, let's build a relationship. Maybe there's some opportunity that can come from this. So if you go after them like forcefully now, and don't get me wrong, you probably have the right to do that. But I'm just saying, if you do that, a couple of things are going to happen, because Dahan, I know that you photograph lots of this motocross stuff. So you're probably somewhat known and connected in that industry. If you develop the reputation of going after these companies, legally, get the lawyers to sick on them and send them threatening letters and all that kind of stuff, that's eventually going to impact your standing within that community and your ability to build other relationships and to potentially make money on those relationships. So to me, the way I look at situations like that, I always like to assume, now this is for the purpose of conversation, because we all know what happens when you assume, right? But my first decision is to assume that no harm was intended and that there is some ignorance at play. Now, any lawyer will tell you, as will any cop or prosecutor, ignorance is no excuse for the law, okay? You don't get to say, I didn't know it was against the law to murder that person. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. That doesn't get you off the hook, right? You still broke the law. So, to me, I'm going to assume that no harm was meant. I am going to assume that it was done out of eagerness and excitement, and I'm going to assume that they're not profiting tons of money off of this. And I'm going to say to myself, what do I really want here, right? Do I need to get a ton of money out of that, or could I maybe profit in a better way if I was able to open the door to build a relationship with this, what appears to be a relatively small company, and be able to maybe do some work for them in the future, paid work, photographing their products, and or at a minimum, maybe, and I don't recall how big their Instagram following was, but maybe establish a relationship where at future events, I'll make it a point to get them a couple shots of their products in use in exchange for the understanding that I'm going to hand them those pictures, but they are going to make it a point to tag me in those pictures and talk about how cool my pictures are in the description of those pictures so that I'm going to pick up some traffic from them. If there's traffic to be had, that's an if, right? There's a lot of different ways that we could build a working relationship. And so we have to kind of really look at all the value sets. What do we win? What do we lose? What do we gain? All that kind of stuff. And for me, once again, I am not a lawyer. I would reach out to them. Initially, I'd be very willing, again, for me, I'd be very willing to make contact by email or try to get a phone number and call them and ask to speak with whomever I need to speak with and have a friendly conversation. And part of the underlying message of that conversation is basically, without any threatening language, to let them know, like, look, I'm glad that you appreciated the picture, but I hope you understand that picture is representing now your product and you are using it to help sell more product for yourself. So that creates a situation where ultimately you should be paying for it. You've proven that you see value in that image. So I'd like to talk to you to see, is there a way that we can work together and build a relationship? Because I don't want to have to, hand you an invoice or come after you for legal fees and all that kind of stuff. I'd rather build a relationship with you and work with you and for you moving forward. So I would want to use that, what I perceive is honestly not, a company like Volvo, they should freaking know better, right? I mean, come on. Companies that size, they don't I was going to say something inappropriate. They don't go to the bathroom unless the lawyers say, hey, okay, it's now, but, do it this way and don't do it that way. Everything is by the lawyers, right? It's just how it is. Smaller company, that's not the case. It's probably like the wife or the nephew of the owner of the company that's doing their social media, right? Who knows? So I just think there's more to be gained by creating a relationship than there is to immediately go for that money piece, right? I mean, it's a great shot, but it's certainly not a career-defining shot. It's certainly not a career-making shot. And I don't mean any of that as a put-down. I'm just saying, let's be real, right? So that would be my approach. And I hope that helps. I hope that gives you something to work with. I would say if you are really, really determined to try and bleed them for money, then yes, go talk to an attorney so that the very first communication you make with them is worded appropriately and kind of sets the stage. But I honestly don't feel that it's worth putting the money in an attorney's pocket for that picture in that circumstance. I honestly think that you can profit more in the long run if you build a relationship there. So, all right. The last one that I had that came in early tonight, and we're going to dig in this one. It's a little bit small because it's a long question, so I apologize if you're having a hard time seeing it like on your phones and that, but I'm going to read it to you. This is from Michael. He is a portrait photographer, and I really wanted to talk about this because I think it's a great business concept question, even though he's in South Africa. It applies pretty much anywhere in the world. I'm a portrait photographer in South Africa, and my challenge is pricing. But he's got a very specific kind of situation here. Most photographers in my area charge the equivalent of about $85, and I charge over $100 minimum. This is for a portrait. And this is in South Africa, so my first instinct was to say, wow, that's way too cheap. But, there's valuation differences in the money and all that, so I'm not worried about that. We'll continue with the question. I want to increase my prices, but I want to know how can I add value to my offering so that I don't scare away my potential customers, which is a great question. And he doesn't want to have to add that value by increasing his costs, which is a smart businessman. Okay? He goes on to say the last part, the customers don't normally ask for prints, meaning he's doing most of his sales, basically online. It's digital sales. Yet I do manage to sell some canvases, which cost him about $35, and he sells them at $45, which is not really a lot of profit because, he's selling maybe one of those per shoot. Okay. So, Michael, I will tell you that last piece, the $10 markup, regardless of what the money valuations may be between South Africa and the United States, you are not making enough of a markup on that. So we're not going to deal with that one for now. I'm just going to leave that there. But your first question is excellent. How do you raise your prices, especially when you're already a little higher to begin with, and you want to add more value to the shoot, but you don't want to increase your cost? So, Michael, I would actually throw two suggestions out there, and you're maybe going to use one or the two, or maybe a combination of both. And who knows, if we're lucky, my suggestions will spark something else, and you're going to come up with another solution on top of these. But number one, this is the one that most photographers actually don't consider when they're in this position. And to be clear, folks, I have never seen Michael's work, so this is not a reflection on him personally because I don't know what his work is like, and I don't want to know for the sake of the conversation. But Michael, option number one is improve the quality of your work. So we all know, folks, there's always room for improvement. I don't care who you are. There's always room for improvement. That's the first thing. And understand that the value of your work, what people are willing to pay, it's always a matter of what is the perceived value. You can say something costs this, that, or otherwise, but the public will have a perception. Is that a good price, a fair price? Is that too much, not enough, etc.? So the point here is, first thing you want to do is look at your own work and look at ways that you can improve it to increase the perception of it. Part of that perception of your work, Michael, honestly, may be the way you're presenting your work in terms of what images you're selecting to show on your social media or on the website, even the way that you talk about your images on social media. You might want to consider taking the online presentations that I do about social media and websites and branding. They'll help you a lot with that piece. That's option number one. Option number two, Michael, in order to increase the perceived value, would be partnering. Now, what I mean by partnering is turn your portrait sessions into more of an experience. So if you want your portraits to be top-notch, amazing, you're going to use a makeup artist, period. If you're not using a makeup artist, the simple fact is, and this applies to all of you, not just Michael, if you're not using a makeup artist, the simple fact is your portraits are not as good as they could be or should be. It's just a fact of life, right? So by adding in a makeup artist, which, by the way, the subject pays for, it's up to you to sell the importance of that. But you let the subject pay them directly, right? So you're out of that transaction. But that whole process, the addition of that step and that piece of it creates additional perceived value to the work that you are doing and charging for. So even though you're also adding on this charge for a makeup artist, which again, you're not adding it on. They're paying the makeup artist. But you can get away with charging more because the whole process seems and feels it is perceived to have more value. Okay? So those are the things that I would look at. That's where I would start. It's take a good look at your own work. What can you do to improve your work and make it stand out more? Take a look at how you present your work. What can you do to present it in a better way? And then look for ways that you can add experiences to your shots. Maybe even you create like for a boudoir session. If you're doing boudoir portraits, you create a whole scenario where they go to a spa first and they get a massage. And then they get their nails done and they get their hair done and their makeup done. All that's being paid for separately. You're partnering with these places, hopefully getting a discount for the client, but it's an experience. All of those things increase the value. Folks, if you're photographing people in general, I don't care if it's portraits, weddings, I don't care what it is, senior portraits, I don't care what. Don't think that people are just paying you for the pictures. They're not. People, especially in today's world, especially millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Zers, they will use their disposable income more freely and with more perceived value if it involves an experience. There's tons and tons and tons of marketing research out there on that. So make sure that you're paying attention to those things because that will definitely help you. Okay. All right. Scrolling back up to the beginning here. I'm back into the chat now. So let's see what we missed from FN89 here. Gear question. That's okay. This one's not which camera should I buy, so it's all right. Can you recommend something that will hold 3 speed lights with roughly 12 plus inches of distance between the lights instead of just 3 light stands? So FN89, what you're referring to is something called grip gear, right? Companies like Manfrotto make lots of grip gear. The way you find out about this stuff, and believe me, I've been doing photography for, longer than I'd like to brag about, honestly. And I still stumble on grip gear that I've never seen before because there's new stuff being created all the time. So I'm going to switch my screen over here. I happen to pull this up right because I saw your question come in right before I went live. So I did a quick Google search for you here, and I'm on the Manfrotto website. So it doesn't mean you have to buy this at Manfrotto. You can get them at B&H, Amazon, Adorama. And please, like in Ottawa, I don't know if you have a camera store there, but check your local camera store first, please. Okay. There's a couple things that they make. And by the way, anything that Manfrotto makes, there's a Chinese company that makes it cheaper. So depending on what it is, the Chinese stuff is every bit as good, depending on what it is, right? So for starters, this thing that you see up here, the extension arm, this is not quite 12 inches, but it comes in about 10 inches. It's got the baby pin on the end. These here, I love these guys, these 2-section articulated arms. I've got one up here that is holding my microphone. I've got another one over here that's got the GoPro sitting on it. I've got another one over here that's got my Ninja Atomos on it for when I'm actually recording videos. I use these things everywhere. They are amazing, and they're extremely solid, okay? They do have recommended weight limits. Make sure you read the specs. Or you could get something like this, which is actually a microphone support. But if you're talking like speed lights or that kind of stuff, FN89, this would totally handle it, where it's the 3 bars. And I'm sure if you look around, you could even get one like this that is probably expandable, where you can make it longer, shorter, that type of stuff. So just know that companies like Manfrotto do lots of cool grip gear. You can go to like B&H or Adorama's websites and just basically search grip gear, okay? And, take it from there. But that's the kind of stuff that I would recommend that you look at, okay? And again, I wanted to take just a real quick second before I get into the next question here. I mentioned that our sponsor tonight is Spiffy Gear. For those of you that may not remember, or if you haven't been following me long enough, I've done previous videos in the past, regular tutorials, on the Spiffy Gear specular lights, which are amazing. And they're actually the lights that I'm using right now to light my green screen behind me. And then also the Light Blaster, which allows you to project images and patterns onto a background. There's a video on my YouTube channel about them. But I wanted to show you these KYU 6s. So in the Stuck at Home challenge videos, in fact, here, let me just go full screen for a second. In the Stuck at Home challenge videos, I was using these to light a lot of the close-up and abstract stuff that I was doing. At the time, they were called Lumis. They've changed the name on them for legal reasons. Straight up, it happens, right? No big deal. But there's basically 2 different ones. So the first one is the colors, RGB. So you've got, various power settings, but then also you can change, the colors as you go through, which awesome. But these are like, we've all, as kids, we had like the slap bracelet things. You can take these things and they're slap bracelets. It looks really good next to my Fitbit, right? There you go. So, batteries built in. They are rechargeable via a USB cord. Super, super simple. And then to turn it off, we just press and hold, and it will power down. Then you have the bicolor, which is basically from tungsten all the way to, whoops, I went too far, daylight balanced. And then, of course, you still have the various power settings, etc. You can do a mix and a blend, also collapsible. And then, as you can see in or on their website, they've just released, which is what makes these things really cool, these bundle sets, which there's a bracket now that will hold 3 of them, which gives you basically a small light panel. There's a charger to be able to charge 3 at one time. There's also the Vloggers bundle, so that you can set one of the Lumis up on top of your camera if you're vlogging, that just to give you a nice fill light. strictly my personal opinion, okay? Lights like this are a must in every photographer's toolkit. I've got like 6 of these, and I will probably wind up purchasing more because especially, well, not especially, but when shooting video, they're great for adding little bits of accent light. When, you know, doing stuff out on location, you can use them for fill or placing them in a shot to get interesting and you know, really kind of jazz up the light a little bit. So they're great utility lights. They're super lightweight. They're super small. No, you're not going to take these out and like light portraits with them unless you've got them like this close to the person's face, right? That's not what they're for. They're accent pieces. But, you know, I talked before about the idea of really paying attention to learning to nuance your light. All of the coolest light that you see, it's nuanced. So in fact, here, I'll put the website address in the chat window for you, but in the show notes below, you'll find the link. And again, the 15% discount, it's good until October 3rd. So it does have an expiration, and you use the code TOGCHAT15. Okay, so I'm going to put all that in there for you. There you go. So that's in the chat window, so you have it. Okay. Oh my God, it's 7 o'clock already. Let me try and do just a couple more questions in really quick. You guys got some great stuff for me tonight. Scrolling ahead here. Charles, have I mentioned that I will be presenting at ClickCon next month? You know, I have posted on it on social media. I have not mentioned it here. I should. So bear with me 1 second. I'm going to bring the information up so that I can show you guys. And let's see here. Let me get the right website. So actually, we'll do it this way. Let me switch my screen over. So this is the ClickCon website, which, of course, was supposed to happen in Chicago. It's not. It's completely virtual this year. So in the chat window there is the website URL. And when you go to the website, you're going to see the information you're looking at right now on my screen. That's actually for 2021. So scroll down just a little bit, and here you have what's going on for 10 months in the meantime. This is really cool what they did. So if you click on the ClickCon Nation link, you'll see that they've taken this year's event virtual, but they're spreading it out over 10 months. So it started in August. It's already going on. You can still join. And it's going to go all the way through till May of 2021. And there's stuff happening basically every weekend. There are some meetups. Most of it's virtual learning. They're doing online trade shows and vendor education pieces, all kind of cool stuff. So this weekend, actually, this Sunday, my fellow Olympus visionary Tracy McGlosky is going to be presenting about cultivating unlimited creativity. And of course, it's sponsored by Olympus. And she will also be participating in the virtual trade show portion with Olympus, which is kind of like what's in Tracy's bag. So she's going to be going through all the gear that she uses, etc. And then my presentation is coming up. Whoops, I backed up too far from the schedule there. Let's find that. My presentation is, I believe, October 11th. I should know this off the top of my head. It's bad that I don't. There it is. Yes, in fact, they haven't put my title in yet. How about that? I think they're working on it now because they were changing some stuff around today. But I will be teaching about shooting beauty and everything that goes into that, and all the gear, settings, everything. I'm going to be using the virtual 3D software to show how to, you know, manipulate the lighting and how I do all the cool stuff that I do. So I would encourage you guys, check it out. I put the link in the chat, and I'll make sure that the link is in the show notes for you. As far as the online events go, they're really putting together a really, really awesome online event. Okay? All right, and scrolling on down here. From Edwin. Greetings from Colombia, South America. Thanks for tuning in. So for a starter product photography, would you recommend speedlights over LED lamps? If you're talking like tabletop type product, LED lamps all the way, Edwin. Less expensive, easier to use, and your lighting is what they call WYSIWYG, which is actually a computer terminology. What you see is what you get, right? So it's actually going to be a lot easier for you to learn and manipulate and finesse your lighting if you don't have a ton of lighting experience. it'll be much easier if you work with the LEDs. So that would definitely be my advice for that one. And let's see here, scrolling on down. And Michael, I had a series of news photos recently that became very popular with the media. Everyone asked me permission to use them in their stories except one. They ignored my request for attribution. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for the news outlets and the media outlets, the rules change a little bit. And admittedly and inappropriately, some of them get a little bit aggressive in terms of how they, how they go about using them, et cetera. But yeah, I am, again, depending on the situation. And I don't think there's a one size fits all. Every situation needs to be evaluated independently. I always kind of look at it in terms of weighing my options where do I stand to gain the most? And it's not always about money. It shouldn't always be about money. I'm a firm believer in that. Life is not always about money, okay? I know a lot of people don't think that way, and those people are much better off financially than I am. I'm not going to lie, but I'm just not a person that, feels it's always about the money. So, all right, 7:06, not too bad. So, first of all, thank you. I know that I took a little bit of extra time tonight with my topic for the night, but I think it's really, really important. And I hope I will be posting a blog article about that topic tomorrow, which is everything that you heard tonight, but it's also expanded on a little bit more with a little bit more detail and a few more suggestions. So I would encourage you, please check it out. I don't know if you folks are aware of it, but my website has over 500 pages on my website. There is a ton of information. Articles, they're not all based on videos that I've done, because certainly when I do a video, I, create an article for it. But if you go through the photography tips here, you'll find tons of stuff. Also, this link right here, and I know it's kind of hidden, but it's also right there, resources for models. If you click on this link, there is tons of information about the modeling industry, how to create a great portfolio, modeling agencies, submitting to agencies, working with children, prep for models and photographers. Every article that's in here, whether it's written for models or not, photographers, you will learn a ton of information from it. And modeling agency directories for all 50 states in the United States, modeling agency directories for, makeup artist directories for all 50 states, and also promo agency directories. So check it out. A lot of good information there for you. But tomorrow, the article about the 9 traits will be posted. So again, special thanks to the folks at Spiffy Gear for sponsoring tonight's episode. Don't forget, there is a discount in the show notes below. Take advantage of it before October 3rd. And folks, as always, thanks for joining me. And please remember these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TOGCHAT. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.